the National Party has released over the weekend, I'm pretty sure, an energy policy, some sort of sustainable energy policy. And I was amazed to see people who I wouldn't have normally picked as National Party supporters and greenie type people saying, geez, this isn't a bad policy. So that has piqued my interest. And I thought maybe we should collectively find out more about it. So we're joined now by National's infrastructure spokesperson, National MP for Hutt South, Chris Bishop. Chris, welcome to the platform, mate. Good to have you with us.
Good morning. G'day.
Look, I have to do this because the Twitter is blowing up, and I do not mean to ambush you. And it is a simple question. And if you don't want to answer it because it wasn't the brief we had, actually, it'd be fair enough. What is a woman?
It's an adult human female.
Bang, that was bloody easy. Well done, mate. 10 out of 10. All right, let's move on then. What is this policy you have released, and why do people like it so much?
Yeah, it's funny, just in the intro there, you were saying all these people who you wouldn't necessarily expect to be National supporters coming out in support of it, people like Greenpeace, even Martin Bradbury, my old mate Martin Bradbury, bomber.
Even that
worried me a little bit when I saw that he liked it. So look, what we're saying is we've got this fantastic opportunity in New Zealand, right, to go electric in terms of our electricity, but also wider than that in terms of...
well, electricity is always electric, Chris.
Yeah, that's right. I mean renewable electricity, right? We've got this fantastic opportunity. Sorry, I should have said renewables. Fantastic opportunity here with, our electricity is generated from the hydro lakes, from geothermal, from a bit of wind. And we want to see more of that because with renewable electricity powering our economy, we can drive electric cars on electricity, we can have buses and trains, and we've got the Southern Hemisphere's first electric ferry here in the Hutt, crossing from Dave Bay over to Queen's Wharf, all runs on electricity, fantastic. And so we want to take advantage of that by reforming the Resource Management Act to make it easier to build renewable electricity generation in New Zealand, where our policy is called Electrify NZ, and there's a whole bunch of technical changes to the RMA and transmission and distribution. But the take-home point for people is that by electrifying the economy, we can reduce our carbon emissions. But here's the real thing, right? The Greens would have you believe that to take action on climate change, we all have to, wear hemp clothes and eat organic and, eat
vegan food,
stop having children and all the rest of it.
In other words, be miserable.
We don't have to get out of our cars.
Yeah,
it's a very pessimistic view, right? We don't have to do that. We can grow the economy, we can drive our cars, we can take public transport, we can keep having children, we can keep eating meat, we can live our lives, and we can grow the economy, but we can do it in a clean way.
All right, and we do have natural advantages in things like hydro. We've got tons of wind, wave activity. We've got a lot of that. We've got a huge coastline. It seems to me, we start well ahead of the curve if that's the sort of policy that we're pursuing.
Oh, we do. I mean, 85% of our electricity generated last year was from renewable sources, so I think we're third highest in the Western world, which is a fantastic starting point. But we want to go beyond that, right? We want to double our electricity generation from renewable sources over the next 30 years. And we're going to need to as well, because all the estimates are that demand is going to go up. But here's the thing. It's really, really difficult to build new power stations in this country. We pay tribute to our forefathers who dammed the Waikato River and the Clutha, and fantastic. And without those dams, we wouldn't have the lights turned on at the moment. But those projects are unconsentable at the moment. It needs to be
why are they unconsentable? Talk us through that.
Well, because they have an impact on the environment. And, here's the thing, right? You build a wind farm, you've got to build tracks up to the turbines, you've got to put the blades in. They have an effect on some extent. They have an effect on the birds in the area. Hydro electricity clearly has an impact on the environment because you're altering the natural flow. Geothermal does as well to some extent. So, it's impossible not to live life without having some sort of impact on the environment. Now, you've got to mitigate and do what you can to avoid those effects, obviously. But there is an effect. But here's my point. Climate change is real. Emissions, we've got to get them down. We have legal obligations to do that. We also have a moral obligation to do it. My point is that we can do that whilst we grow the economy, whilst we drive our cars, whilst we live our lives. Let's just take advantage of the abundant natural resources that we have in this amazing country of ours we've got some of the best wind in the world. People sort of mocking me on Twitter saying,
Best
what do you mean by best wind in the world?
Wind
Well, what I
isn't
mean by that is we've got all these
gradable.
sites.
It's either strong or it's weak, Chris.
Well, actually, the generators do grade it. I mean, what they do is they go around and they find the sites where the wind is the most reliable and the most consistent. That's what I mean by best wind in the world.
Yeah.
You know, we've got great sites for wind farms.
All right. Well, this sounds... Is there much cost involved, or do you let the market decide once you remove the red tape?
We let the market decide. This is the thing about New Zealand's electricity system. We don't need to do what the government wants to do, which is spend $15 billion of taxpayer money on a new electricity hydro project down in the wrong part of the country. They want to do this Project Onslow White Elephant down south, $15 billion of taxpayer money. That single project that the government is looking at is actually counterproductive. It's stymieing investment in the electricity market. You've got a whole bunch of privately owned generators and listed companies sitting there going, well, we've got all these sites we want to build, we've got a bit of wind, we've got some geothermal, we've got some hydro, but why would we invest when the government's going to do it for us? So the government needs to get out of the way of these things, dump the Onslow project, which is a big white elephant boondoggle, reform the Resource Management Act properly, and let people get on with it.
Yeah. Chris, it also strikes me, did you consider nuclear power?
We don't need nuclear power in New Zealand. It's very expensive, is the first point, and so it would raise electricity prices, and we're not big enough as a country to need the sort of large amounts of power that it would produce. So we just don't need it. The next cab off the rank in terms of the cost of generation is wind and hydro and geothermal, where we can find it. Solar is rapidly decreasing in price, and so you will see a bit of solar around the place in the next 10, 20 years, I suspect. But we don't need nuclear in New Zealand, and look, that would be a political fight that we just don't need to have, and so that's not something we're looking at.
All right, so that's been taken off your party's agenda.
Yes,
is this something?
No,
and I know this sounds weird. Is this something you could work with the Green Party on?
Well, it's interesting.
Even as a cis white man.
But it's interesting. The Greens' response to it was to say, "Oh, well, we're doing all that stuff already," which is just not true, right? So the government's resource management reforms that they're putting through at the moment, they're ramming through with the Greens. All the generators and every expert who I've talked to says that those reforms will make it harder to build a wind farm. I mean, where the Wind Energy Association rocked up to the select committee, and I said to the guy, I said, if these bills pass, will it be easier or harder to build a wind farm in New Zealand? Simple question. He said, it'll be harder. Contact Energy turned up. They run a lot of power in New Zealand. Contact Energy rocked up and said, the single biggest barrier to decarbonising the New Zealand economy is the resource management reforms put forward by the government. The single biggest barrier. He said you can kiss goodbye any hope of decarbonisation as a result of the RMA reform. So the irony of the whole thing is that the Greens are currently propping up a government that is going to make it harder to build more wind farms in New Zealand, which I just think is ridiculous.
Yeah. One of the big issues we've got with this is energy lost through transmission, though, Chris. And most of our hydro, for example, power is generated down south. We've got questions over TY Point. You try and get that across the state, pump it up to the North Island, even get it to something like Nelson or the West Coast, and you are literally burning or spilling hundreds of thousands of kilowatts of energy because of the cost of transmission and the inefficiency of transmission. Do you have a plan to get round that?
Yeah, so the second part of our policy is to make it easier to upgrade and build more transmission and distribution, because it's all very well having the generation, but you've got to get the transmission right as well, and that is difficult as well. Transpower will tell you that they run the grid. They'll tell you that they do need to upgrade the transmission lines in various parts of the country, and it's difficult. They need resource consent like anybody else, and the distribution companies as well. We're going to need huge capital investment in the distribution, which is owned by 28 local lines companies. So we're reforming the rules around that as well. The point there is that the rules around distribution were basically written in the early 2000s, and they don't reflect a world in which we have a lot more demand on the grid because of people moving to electricity, moving to renewable generation, and they don't reflect the huge capital investment that's going to be required in the city to get the electricity around the network. So we're going to have to rewrite the rules a little bit, really technical changes to the Commerce Act. Most people won't know what they are, and frankly, most people in Parliament don't know what they are, but they'll be necessary, and we'll just do that if we win the election.
Good on you, Chris. Can I say thank you for answering all my questions, particularly the first one so easily. Do you have any comment on the Prime Minister's inability to answer that question in a straightforward way?
Look, these are tricky issues. I was a little bit surprised that he hadn't really anticipated it, because it's been a debate that I think many people have been following, and I certainly have been following the J.K. Rowling stuff in the UK and Sir Keir Starmer's comments in the UK recently. It's a debate that's been playing out a lot overseas, and I've been following it. I know other people have been following it as well. So. It's a genuinely tricky issue, but I was,
You didn't seem to have any problems with it, I got to say.
Well, I suspected you might be.
You thought ahead, Chris. Are you going to miss me on Twitter?
About what I might say.
You're going to miss me on Twitter?
Oh, I saw that. Now, what happened there?
Who the hell knows, mate? I think it was a guy called Gulad Meyer, David Farrier. Chanel Lau basically got together and triggered an algorithm and took offence at every little slightly tongue-in-cheek thing I'd ever said in my, 12 years on Twitter, and got me blocked.
Oh, goodness me. Well, there's plenty of abuse going on Twitter, but I wouldn't have put you in the top 10.
Top 10, top 20 maybe. Hey, Chris, thank you very much for explaining that policy to us. Very interesting and a little bit exciting even. Cheers. That is Chris Bishop.